The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of March 16, 2025, the podcast that shot Cupid. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's isolate the news of the bogus. So there's big news because a Columbia graduate student, Mahmoud Khalil, has had his green card revoked and is in danger of being deported because they didn't like the fact that he protested Israel. He's charged with, quote, spreading anti-Semitism in a way that is contrary to the foreign policy of the U.S. They also accused him of mobilizing support for Hamas, whatever that's supposed to mean. Khalil is a Syrian-born Palestinian refugee, has a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in public administration, and is married to a wife who is a U.S. citizen and 8 months pregnant. And the big question seems to be, how many rights do you have if you're a non-citizen? The relevant part of the First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. All three of those rights seem to apply to Khalil, and I don't see any part of that where it says it only applies to citizens. Again, the Constitution doesn't grant rights. It guarantees existing rights. For example, the 15th, 19th, 24th, and 26th Amendments all mention citizens regarding the right to vote. But when it comes to the Bill of Rights, it never mentions citizens, only people. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression wrote, This is America. We don't throw people in detention centers because of their politics. Doing so betrays our national commitment to freedom of speech. The allegation is that Khalil engaged in speech that was anti-American and pro-Hamas. He wasn't even alleged to have committed any crime. And this is also the same kind of thing we see where criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza are seen as pro-Palestine, and anything pro-Palestine is seen as being pro-Hamas. And even if it were pro-Hamas, that's still free speech. There's also some monkeying around with venues. Although he lives in New Jersey, the court case is in the Southern District of New York, and they've moved Khalil to a detention center in Louisiana and seem to be wanting to move the venue there, where maybe they'll have a jury more sympathetic to their prosecution. Marco Rubio has said, quote, We will be revoking the visas and or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported. Okay, but you need to get Congress to go along with it. And even if they do, you can't apply it to actions taken before Congress amends the law. Or else you'll run afoul of the Constitution's prohibition of ex post facto laws. Wow, they're racking up the constitutional violations, aren't they? But how will the courts react? This is very much an open question. Congress has given the federal government plenary power over immigration, with vague statutory language that allows the powers granted to be interpreted very broadly. The Fifth Circuit, which is where Khalil would appeal if he's prosecuted in Louisiana, favors this interpretation. However, if the courts rule that strict scrutiny applies, which they should since this is a First Amendment issue, the fact that the government acknowledges that this is speech-based, coupled with there being no evidence tying his speech to imminent lawless action, should mean the courts would find this unconstitutional. A federal judge has blocked his deportation for the time being, so we'll have to see how things play out and in what venue. The whole question should be a non-starter. Whatever statute they rely on for this, that statute is not superior to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights doesn't grant rights to the people. It restricts the government. It's about what government cannot do, not what people can.
Sometimes you just have to stomp some skulls. From the mind of Mr. Dapperton, a game for the ages. In a world where a race of undead furries tries to take over the world's nuclear arsenal, one man must stop them. But which man? You choose. The Orange Overlord.
Oh, my ear!
Bernie Slanders. Debate Dominator.
My kippa's ruined!
Or Joe Sleepy.
Build me back.
And of course, Mr. Fancy Pants himself.
Forget those losers! You can get the Gold Edition and play as 4 more characters, including me, the Spooky Spaceman, along with Billionaire Brat, Professor Proof, and the easiest way to play, as Jesus himself!
7 complete different worlds, with more coming all the time. Full controller support. You can even get eaten by a worm and pooped out into a furry cathedral.
And don't forget that Gold Edition, where you can play the ultimate challenge, Devil's Doorstep.
This gory satirical adventure pulls no punches. You know you want this game. Go to links.pogosity.tv/Skullstompers and play Skull Stompers now.
It seems like as more time goes by, we get even more reason to distrust medical professionals. In this case, we seem to have a regular episodic of doctors dismissing the experience of autoimmune patients, telling them their symptoms are all in your head. And it's resulted in long-term psychological issues for these disease sufferers, including shame, self-doubt, depression, and, for some, suicidal thoughts and even attempts. A study published in the journal Rheumatology looked at almost 3,400 patients and examined their psychological well-being. The study found persisting adverse outcomes of perceived psychosomatic and psychiatric misdiagnoses were identified in multiple domains. This included over 80% of patients reporting that it had damaged their self-worth and 72% reporting that it still upset them. And this also resulted in a significantly higher likelihood of underreporting and healthcare avoidance, but didn't affect medication adherence. The authors concluded, patient-reported psychosomatic and psychiatric misdiagnoses are associated with persisting adverse impacts in multiple domains, including mental health, medical relationships, self-worth, and some healthcare behaviors. Health services and clinicians should consider these potential adverse impacts on patients and offer support to reduce any persisting negative impacts. The study's lead author, Melanie Sloan, said, quote, overall, we found depression levels were significantly higher and well-being levels lower in people who reported receiving mental health or psychosomatic misdiagnoses. She quoted one of her patients as saying, one doctor told me I was making myself feel pain. I still can't forget those words. Telling me I'm doing it to myself has made me very anxious and depressed. Some of these harms lasted for decades, persisting in middle or even older age. A woman with lupus said that her doctor told her at age 16 that she had so many symptoms it had to be hypochondria. Quote, it has affected my mental health very negatively, and I do think it's affected me in my sense of self. It's not good for anyone at my age, but as a teenage girl, being told you don't know your own feelings is absolutely no way to shape a human being. The problem is, autoimmune diseases like lupus are characterized as having a lot of symptoms. Doctors consider a patient reporting a long list of symptoms as a red flag for being hypochondria or Munchausen's or something like that. But as Sloan pointed out, quote, this generalization rather dangerously fails to account for the fact that a long list of symptoms is also a red flag for many autoimmune diseases. And that's made trickier by the fact that a lot of autoimmune diseases don't have any clear tests that can be made to verify them. And so doctors have a hard time believing their patients. But there's good news. Sloan reports that the doctors they interviewed weren't aware of the repercussions of the misdiagnoses. Quote, reassuringly, almost all of them were saddened and motivated to improve their patients' experience. Several explained that they thought they were being reassuring by telling patients that their symptoms were most likely to be psychological or stress-related and thought this would be preferable to patients worrying about having a disease. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, and doctors need to be made aware of this. When they are, it sounds like they can understand and become motivated to do better. But there are an awful lot of doctors and an awful lot of autoimmune sufferers. So maybe if you're in that situation, take a copy of this study to your doctor. Unless they consider researching your condition to be another symptom of hypochondria. God, this is tricky.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.pagosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.pagosity.tv.
And in another medical story, the CDC isn't improving much at all. Once again, we see that they can collect some good data and still come out on the wrong side. They posted that, although cigarette smoking is still the leading cause of preventable death in the U.S., prevalence of smoking is at its lowest levels in 60 years. From 2017 to 2023, 6.8 million adults stopped smoking cigarettes. That's an astounding success story. You'd think that, given the CDC's official mission, that would be cause for popping champagne, especially since smoking will kill about half of all long-term users, meaning almost 3.4 million lives have been saved. But once again, we see that the CDC is not an organization of science. It's an organization of politics. Their official finding is that tobacco use has increased and become even more of a problem. The CDC's Office on Smoking and Health published, quote, "Current tobacco product use among adults has not changed since 2017. Why? What do they mean by current tobacco product use? Well, even though 6.8 million cigarette smokers quit, over the same time period, 7.2 million started vaping. We've referenced Michael Siegel before. He's an anti-smoking activist who used to work for that self-same Office on Smoking and Health. As we covered, he was initially anti-vaping as well, until he looked at the data and changed his mind. Because, you see, he's actually concerned with things like doing science and finding the truth. Regarding this article, he wrote, "You've got to be kidding me. What the CDC is actually saying is that the saving of more than 3 million lives is offset because an increasing number of youth are ripping vapes. The CDC doesn't see any advantage in switching people in massive amounts from combustible tobacco cigarettes to much less hazardous, tobacco-free, smokeless e-cigarettes. They would rather that people smoke real cigarettes than fake ones." As we've covered, there's a scientific consensus that vaping is at least 95% safer than smoking, probably a lot more. That means that, of those 7.2 million new vapors, the amount that died wouldn't be 3.6 million, but 360,000 at most. That would mean a net 3 million lives saved. Quote, "I find this disturbing not only because it completely distorts the science and misleads the public into thinking that smoking and vaping are equivalent in terms of health risks, but because it demonstrates a complete lack of compassion for adult smokers who are suffering debilitating disease and death due to their use of actual tobacco that is actually combusted. It also shows a profound disrespect for the millions of people who have overcome one of the strongest addictions, smoking, by switching to a much less hazardous product that likely saved their lives. But I guess if you're an organization of politics, you need to keep the money coming in, and success is your worst enemy. You need to keep making it seem as if there's been no progress, or even making things worse, to continue to justify your funding. And they do it dishonestly. Quote, "Vapes are not tobacco products because they do not contain tobacco. They truly want to paint a picture of no progress in tackling the product of tobacco use. It provides an excuse for them to continue to be needed and to argue for continued funding. The same motivation, I believe, is driving groups like ALA, AHA, and ACS to make the same decision to treat a non-tobacco product as a tobacco product. And that's without even considering how many vapors quit and how much easier it is to quit vaping than smoking. In fact, as we've covered, many smokers have used vaping as a means of ceasing all nicotine consumption whatsoever. I'm including a link to an NIH report from 2022 which found that smokers who switched to e-cigarettes were 8 times more likely than smokers to quit nicotine altogether and 10 times more likely to stop being daily smokers. The reduction of 6.8 million smokers is monumental. Considering that, as we've covered, the most addictive drug we know of is nicotine, and given how harmful smoking is, this should be a triumph. But once again, we see that the CDC shamefully doesn't actually care about your health.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Pagosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Pagosity.tv.
And now it's time to extravasate this week's biggest bogon emitter. So you guys remember Perkins Coie, right? They're the law firm that created Russiagate and the Steele dossier as part of their work for Hillary Clinton and her campaign, and were behind most of the efforts to stop investigations into 2020 election allegations. Now they're suing the Trump administration because they don't want to do business with them anymore. On March 6th, Trump passed an executive order canceling all federal contracts with Perkins Coie and revoking their security clearances, citing the aforementioned controversies as well as racist and sexist hiring practices. The law firm whined, "This firm is comprised of lawyers who advocate for clients." Their emphasis, its attorneys and employees are not activists or partisans. Really? Could have fooled me. Quote, "But Perkins Coie's ability to represent the interest of its clients and its ability to operate as a legal services business at all are under direct and imminent threat." That is an outright lie. None of this affects any of their clients other than the federal government, who just doesn't want to be their client anymore for perfectly understandable reasons. Listen to the screeching, quote, "Perkins Coie cannot allow its clients to be bullied. The firm is committed to a resolute defense of the rule of law without regard to party or ideology, and therefore brings this lawsuit to declare the order unlawful and to enjoin its implementation. They go on and on like that, but if you get the idea of what I just said, you see why this is bogus. Trump, as we've covered, has complete 100% executive power under the Constitution because the voters said so. And the executive branch gets to decide whom it wants to do business with. The White House said in a statement, quote, "The Trump administration is working efficiently to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. It is absurd that $1 billion law firm is suing to retain its access to government perks and handouts." Now, D.C. District Court Judge Beryl Howell has stopped it, and guess how? By using a TRO. As reported by journalists on Twitter who sat in on the proceeding, the judge actually said that the accusations, quote, "sends little chills down my spine." No chills at all, apparently, over a law firm engaging in unethical practices and even outright perjury to falsely smear a presidential candidate during an election and for years thereafter. We covered this at length last week. A district court judge does not have the ability to overturn purely executive functions. Not even the Supreme Court can do that. The branches are supposed to be separate and co-equal. Contracts are 100% an executive function, as are all questions of security clearances. And if there is some sort of breach of contract, they need to go to the Court of Federal Claims, not the U.S. District Court. So once again, we have a corrupt D.C. District Court judge supporting corrupt clients who want to keep sucking at the government teat and shredding crucial constitutional protections such as separation of powers and important precedents like Marbury v. Madison to do it. And they do it by dishonestly stylizing a summary judgment as a TRO, which, as we saw last week, means the Trump administration is not allowed to appeal it. They have to keep paying them. No, sorry, we have to keep paying them. Absolutely disgraceful. So all that makes Perkins Coie this week's biggest bogon emitter.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-age children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now let's deindustrializationify this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And in a political about-face, it's Donald Trump for some ridiculous remarks he made on Truth Social. But let's get some background first. Bewilderingly, the last time Congress actually passed a budget was in 1997. Since then, they've kept things going by passing a series of continuing resolutions just to keep the government funded. Quite often, these are hotly contested and are the cause of the so-called government shutdowns you might remember. Continuing resolutions are a great way for both sides to whip up public anger at the others while stuffing them all full of pork and other riders in exchange for their vote, with the horrible threat of another government shutdown used to bully the other side into submission. And the Republicans, who were basically elected on a mandate to cut the government, just passed a CR in the House that increases both spending and deficits. The nay votes were split between Democrats who opposed it for partisan reasons and the few Republicans who actually wanted to cut spending. And one of those, as usual, was Thomas Massie of Kentucky. And so Donald Trump, whom so many people pretended was oh so libertarian through and through, posted on Truth Social, quote, "Congressman Thomas Massie, of beautiful Kentucky is an automatic no vote on just about everything. Yeah, that's why we like him. Quote, despite the fact that he has always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. That's a lie, as we'll see later. Quote, he should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. He's just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. He reminds me of Liz Cheney before her historic record-breaking fall. Loss. The people of Kentucky won't stand for it. Just watch. Do I have any takers? Actually, none so far that I've seen. In a different post, he wrote, Congressman, in scare quotes, Thomas Massie voted to delay the debt ceiling bill without getting anything for this horrendously stupid move when Republicans could have gotten everything they wanted. When I heard about this, it was quite simply hard to believe, a catastrophic mistake. Now, and virtually on every other vote, he's a very simple no. He can't even appreciate a continuing resolution when he approved them many times during his career as a congressman, again in scare quotes. Thomas Massie is a grandstander, and the great people of Kentucky are going to be watching a very interesting primary in the not-too-distant future. He instantly got slammed for this online. Being Libertarian tweet-exed, how can you be at Massie for wanting to stop government spending and support Doge at the same time? Good question. And Joel Ellenwood had a better one. What do you call someone who wants to primary Thomas Massie, but not Lindsey Graham? And none other than Ron Paul tweet-exed, remember back in 2020 when Congressman Thomas Massie historically stood up against the $2 trillion COVID spending? Back then, President Trump called Massie a third-rate grandstander and a disaster for America. Massie was correct. He was primaried for standing firm and was victorious in the election. The COVID spending helped to usher in the inflation that we're still dealing with today, not to mention all of the fraud. Once again, Congressman Massie refuses to support reckless Republican spending and debt, and once again President Trump seeks to primary Massie after comparing him to Liz Cheney. If Congress was composed of hundreds of Thomas Massies, we wouldn't be trying to claw our way out of the abyss right now. So now let's get to the actual meat and potatoes from Massie himself. Quote, this tweet from Trump's account is very misleading. I never voted for a CR that became law. I did vote for a CR under McCarthy that included an 8% cut to all discretionary spending. But unfortunately, that CR did not become law. Do research, and you'll find I've been consistent. He also posted,
they're trying to pitch it as a conservative CR versus liberal Democrats, and even the Democrats are going along in the House. But let me tell you why that's a fake fight. They plan to pass it with all Republicans here in the House, but after we leave town, Democrats are going to vote for it in the Senate. That's right. They're going to need about 8 Democrat senators to vote for this thing over in the Senate. That means that this deal has already been cut, that Mike Johnson has cut a deal with the Senate Democrats, Senate leadership, and even Hakeem Jeffries. He's in on this. Well, Mike Johnson is sending us home a day early. We're going to vote on this thing and skip town. If you thought there was really a threat of them not passing it in the Senate, why would you leave town? Really, what we should be doing is what I've said all along. We should be doing 12 separate bills. That's kind of plain as day, if you ask me. Today, Trump is attacking Canada and me. And the difference between the two is Canada will eventually cave.
Ha! Well said, Massie. So that should let all of you know how seriously to take it when Trump pretends to be a libertarian or at least a fiscal conservative. He's not. Despite all the amazing things Elon Musk is doing with Doge, Trump himself is just an old guard Democrat who loves big government. So all of that makes Donald Trump this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Purple Pimpernel edition of the Bogosity Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from P.J. O'Rourke. The difference between American parties is actually simple. Democrats are in favor of higher taxes to pay for greater spending, while Republicans are in favor of greater spending for which the taxpayers will pay. The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.